In this video, I'm going to be talking about the story of a man who was blessed, started out with everything, was criticized, was punished, and tempted, but still ended up coming out on top. This is the story of a man named Joseph. Joseph, if you've heard about Joseph growing up, you would think of the coat of many colors, right? The coat of many colors that his father, Jacob, gave to him. Now, this coat signified that Jacob, quote unquote, liked Joseph the most out of all of his brothers, right? Think about this. If your father liked you more than your other siblings, you'd feel like you'd feel a feeling of love, right? But his brothers hated him. You would probably get that same kind of reaction. Maybe they wouldn't hate you, but they'd hate the father. Now let's think about this. Joseph, coat of many colors. Joseph was a man of many dreams. Joseph was a man who was blessed to be able to interpret dreams. And not only did the coat of many colors upset his brothers, but his dreams from God affected his brothers as well, and it made them hate him even more. His dream was that God gave to him was that he would basically rule and reign over his brothers and Jacob. He would rule over them. That's like placing a king, and Joseph telling them, I will be above you. Could you imagine? That's crazy. Could you imagine that? But see, think about this. That made them so mad to the point where they sold their own brother for 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver. This man got sold. This man got sold by his own brothers, by his own blood. That's crazy, right? Jacob was also believed to think that Joseph was dead. That Joseph basically died by an animal. Think about that. His brothers lied to their father, Jacob. But think about this. Joseph ultimately came out on top, right? He was appointed under Pharaoh. So, in retrospect, he was above his brothers. Now remember, in his dream, his brothers were to bow down toward him, and he was to reign over them. Right? Think about this. Pharaoh, right, he appointed Joseph, right, to be, he was basically under Potiphar. Potiphar was an Egyptian officer, right? But Joseph was still in good standing to the point where he was over certain things in Pharaoh's kingdom, right? So Potiphar's wife was the main problem. She was the main culprit. She was the one who found Joseph, a young looking man who was attractive in her eyes, saw him and was blown away by him. But her whole motive was to trick him, was to tempt him. The devil tried to use her to tempt Joseph. Let's think about this. So this all happened in Genesis chapter 39, right? So think about this. When I say this line, I want you to think about this. The Lord was with Joseph. This is verse 2. So he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. So in verse 3, Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph. So Potiphar knew this. So there was a trust and a determination and a faith in Joseph that Joseph was going to do the right thing regardless, because he had the Lord, right? Giving him success in everything he did. So verse 4 says, this pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. Potiphar saw the Lord is in Joseph's heart and his spirit. Verse 5 says, from the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly and his crops and livestock flourished. I'm gonna talk about what happened and what made Joseph ultimately get tempted, right? The temptation came from Potiphar's wife. And because of Potiphar's wife came in, tried to lay with Joseph. Joseph did not want to do it. Potiphar's wife knew this. She kind of backed off at first, but something grabbed her eye, right? So because of his good looks, because of who he was, and because she knew that the Lord was on his side, right? Mind you, Potiphar knew this. So let me tell you what Potiphar did, even though he knew that the Lord was with Joseph. Potiphar's wife tried to bring in evidence of basically Joseph sleeping with Potiphar's wife. Ain't that some nasty work right there? That's nasty business. If I could be honest with you, if she really tried to play me, so if this was my wife and one of my servants tried to sleep with my wife, I'd go ballistic. But see, this is the thing. Potiphar should have known that he wouldn't have done this because of just who he was, and because the Lord was on his side and the Lord was with him. But Potiphar believed his wife for some reason. So he threw him in prison. Right? This caused Potiphar to have trust issues with Joseph. So he got thrown into prison, and Joseph was in prison, and he was still interpreting dreams. He was still performing his purpose that God gave him. I believe it was a baker and a butler that were in there, and he interpreted both of their dreams. And at the time, Potiphar didn't know that Joseph could do what he did. So he asked Joseph to interpret his dream, right? He did what he did. And because of that, he brought Joseph out of prison. And another thing is, because of what he did, and because he knows what the Lord did for him, Potiphar's mind changed to the point where he believed Joseph. He believed Joseph in the end. Now, it's crazy that he didn't believe Joseph from the jump. But I feel like in any situation, you would believe your closest loved one, your rib, right? You would believe in them. But see, in this instance, Potiphar had to learn that God was with him. So because of that, God was with him, and God was right, he knew he had to trust Joseph now, right? What am I trying to tell you with this story? Temptation is going to hit, and sometimes temptation is going to be in the frontal of our lives, and sometimes it's going to punish us in a beginning retrospect. But in the end, God's going to come out on top. You're going to come out on top if you trust God. And if the Lord is with you, then who can be against you? Who can win the war against you, right? Joseph never lost the war. He never lost the battle. As a matter of fact, let me say this. He may have lost the first battle, but he never lost the war. But I don't think you understand what I'm trying to tell you. Is that you can lose a battle and still come out on top in the war, right? You can go to battle at your job every single day, having to deal with hard-headed people, trying to manage a business, trying to deal with, these different businesses, these people trying to take your money, dealing with people on a regular day basis who don't have your best interest at heart. Every single day you're dealing with these individuals. But see, you may lose the battle, but you're not going to lose the war with God. Shoot, you may not even lose the battle with God. But a lot of times you're going to need to lose to come out on top, right? David was doubted by the people around him. They thought, you think these people believe the shepherd boy could defeat Goliath? No, I wouldn't have believed him, but the Lord was with him. You think me reading what Job went through, everything he went through, how much he lost, it looked like it was over for Job, but Job trusted the Lord. The Lord was with Job. You got to ask yourself, is the Lord with you? Wait, let me rephrase that. Is your heart with God? Right? Because the difference between believing in God and knowing God, right? If you believe God, right? You believe in God. Yeah, you believe God is who he is. But knowing God is that's that faith part, right? You know who he is, you know what he represents, you know what he can do for you, and you know what he's brought you through, and you know what he represents. So what? That's the ultimate difference. You gotta understand, these people, these people in the Bible that went through what they went through is a reflection on what you may be going through. You have to understand that the beginning battle, the beginning struggle isn't a loss, right? You have to take a loss, sometimes a couple losses in the battle to win the entire war. A lot of times, if you read in history, some of these countries, they lost the beginning war, the beginning battles, but then they ended up winning the entire war. Why? Because they trusted themselves, right? Why? Because they kept trusting the process, but also because they still had faith in that process. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope the story of Joseph and how he was tempted, hope that could teach you a lesson. And yeah, as always, God bless.